بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ولي الصالحين وأشهد أن محمدا خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. رب اجعلني مقيم الصلاة ومن ذريتي ربنا وتقبل دعاء. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. اللهم آمين. أما بعد. All praise is due to Allah, the creator, cherisher, and sustainer of the universe. I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah Almighty. And I bear witness that Muhammad ﷺ is his last and final messenger. May the peace, blessings, and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon him, his companions, and those who follow his path until the day of judgment. Allahumma ameen. Respected brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We continue our series on striving for excellence. And just as a reminder, in this series, the purpose is for us to rekindle our connection with the Qur'an. We are sort of scratching the surface with some of the meanings of the verses from the Qur'an, hopefully to trigger an interest in everyone to go back, to read a little bit more the meanings of some of these verses and other verses, to study the Qur'an, to have a relationship with the Qur'an, to solidify our connection and our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Today, inshallah, we're going to talk about a verse that relates to an occasion. And it's amazing how sometimes we go from one occasion to another. Last week we were talking about the occasion of the Hijrah, the immigration of the Prophet ﷺ and the believers from Mecca to Medina, from oppression to an opportunity to establish the Muslim state and the ability to speak freely and to practice their faith freely. Now we are, in a couple of days, going to be witnessing another occasion, another great occasion that relates, actually, interestingly, to the Hijrah in a way, because soon after the Prophet ﷺ made the Hijrah to Medina, they came upon a day when he noticed that the Jews in Medina were fasting. And this was a day in the month of Muharram, which we are in right now. And the Prophet ﷺ asked, well, what is this day? Why are they fasting? So they said, oh, this is a day that the Jews believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved Musa and the children of Israel, the Israelites, from Fir'aun, from Pharaoh. So they celebrate it by fasting. They commemorate this day by fasting. So the Prophet ﷺ said, there are different versions and narrations of this hadith, but in a narration in Sahih Muslim, he said, نَحْنُ أَوْلَى بِمُوسَى مِنْكُمْ. We are more worthy of Moses than you are. Because, of course, we believe that all the prophets are prophets that taught the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the message of Islam and submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in its pure form. So he fasted that day. And then he said, if I were to live, in another narration, he said, if I were to live to the next year, I would fast the 9th and the 10th. So this was the 10th day of Muharram. He said, I would fast the 9th and the 10th so that our ritualistic acts of worship would be unique and distinguished from other peoples of faith. So we're not going to go into the aspects of fiqh. Do you fast just the 10th? Do you fast the 9th and the 10th? Do you fast the 10th and the 11th? This is not the purpose of this discussion. We can talk about that later if you want on a sideline. But here we are to talk about Musa alayhi salam in the context of a verse or a couple of verses. Again, we're talking the short surahs, relatively short. In Sura An-Nazi'at, the second surah in the last part of the Qur'an, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses our beloved Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam while he is still in Mecca. And he says, هَلْ أَتَاكَ حَدِيثُ مُوسَى. Did you hear about the story of Musa? إِذْ نَادَاهُ رَبُّهُ بِالْوَادِ الْمُقَدَّسِ طُوَى. When his Lord called upon him in the blessed valley of Tuwa. اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى. Go to Pharaoh. go to Pharaoh. Indeed, he has committed grave oppression. And this is the verse we want to focus on. اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى. Again, the purpose of this talk is for us to glean lessons that relate to us. How can this relate to us? We'll see. Many, many lessons. But let's put this in a historical context. In a historical context. So we talked already about Ashura. Many other things about Ashura. That's not the point of tonight's discussion. Musa alayhi salam is mentioned in the Qur'an 136 times. More than any other prophet, more than Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam himself. So there must be a significance to the story of Musa. The story of Musa is detailed, in great detail, about 10 times. So his name is mentioned 136 times, but about 10 times where it's mentioned in great detail. So there must be a reason. To the degree that some of the scholars said the Qur'an was almost exclusively about Musa. So we have to pay attention. When Allah is talking about Musa, there must be a relevance. It's not just stories, they're not bedtime stories. These are stories for us to wake up and pay attention. Musa is raised in the household of Pharaoh. So Allah sends him to Pharaoh, who is the most oppressive tyrant of the time. He is raised by him as a child, and he would eventually bring his demise. This is a key lesson I want everyone to keep in the back of their mind. Because the whole essence of the story of Musa is about standing up to tyranny and oppression. Standing up to tyranny and oppression. That's the whole essence of the story of Musa alayhi salam. Whether it is the tyranny of rulers, whether it is the tyranny of my desires and their control over me, whether it is the tyranny that I have over people around me and oppressing my spouse and my children and my family and members of the community, tyranny and oppression in whatever form or shape. It is a story about tyranny and oppression and standing up. And that's why Allah sent Musa straight to the greatest tyrant of the time. In fact, Musa is one of the 5 messengers and prophets that Allah called ulul azmi mina rusul. These are the most persevering because they dealt with the greatest trials and tribulations, yet they didn't give up. So, what's the story of Musa in brief? We all know the story, but just a quick outline. Musa was in a time where Pharaoh not only was a man of tyranny and oppression, but he was also a man of great paranoia. He saw a dream that so Pharaoh is not from his people. He's not from the children of Israel. These are the Egyptians. The Egyptians have a long-standing history of oppression and tyranny, but that continues to this day. No politics, right? We said no politics. So he became paranoid. So he's not from the people of Musa, but there were many peoples, and amongst those peoples were the children of Israel. And he oppressed them. He repressed them. And he saw in his dream that one of those young boys would grow up and would bring his demise. So he devises a brilliant plan. Kill all the boys when they're born. He's paranoid. Now Musa's mom is worried. She has a boy. What's she going to do? And we'll see. We'll see how Allah takes care of everything. She has her motherly instincts, and Allah deals with those motherly instincts in ways that seem, from our human standpoint and our human mind and intellect, the way it is very limited, seem crazy. But from Allah's plan, it's very, very natural, because she's submitting to Allah. Musa grows up where? In Pharaoh's home, in the lion's den, right under his nose. So Pharaoh's plan fails from the very beginning. Why? Because his wife doesn't have children of her own, and because Musa's mom responds to Allah's command and throws Musa in the river, and he ends up right at Pharaoh's doorstep, and the soldiers bring him in and say, hey, we found this kid, and Pharaoh says, it's a boy, kill him. But her heart, Allah put in her heart love, immediate love for this child. So the plan flips 180 degrees. So the tyrant's plan is not 100% foolproof, because it is within the confines of Allah's plan, and we will get to that. And then Musa grows up, and he's wandering through the land, and he sees one of his folk, the children of Israel, fighting with one of the Egyptians. And this guy asks him to help him, and he just pushes this guy, but he was, mashallah, a strong guy. Just a little push, and he kills the guy. And now he's a wanted man. So not only is he from the children of Israel, not only was he supposed to be dead, but now he's a wanted man. So he's running and he's fleeing for his life. So he's a wanted man fleeing for his life. And then something interesting happens in the story of Musa. If you read the Qur'an very carefully, you find Musa goes, and for those who've read the story of Musa, he goes and he helps these two women get water for their animals. And then he goes and meets their father, and they agree on a little, you'll marry one of my daughters if you settle and take care of my land, because I'm an old man. And it's a plan for 8 or 10 years. The Qur'an is not specific as to how long he stayed. But then the Qur'an glosses over those 10 years completely. No details. What happened during those 10 years? Did he have children? Did, things go well? Were there problems with him and his wife? But it seems as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us those day-to-day events that we make a big deal out of are insignificant in Allah's sight if they have no impact in the grand scheme of things that Allah put us on this earth for. Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. Allah put us here for a purpose and a mission. So if day in and day out, my life, I'm not contributing to my mission, to the mission of mankind, of advancing the mission of mankind, being a vice-parent, representing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this earth, it's really insignificant. That day that just passes by with me going to work and making money and putting food on the table, and kids go to school and they come back and they grow up and they graduate, Allah mentions it in a couple of verses and moves on. Those 10 years, in passing. Amazing. But then he gets the message and he goes back to Egypt. And this is when things start to get really heated for Musa alayhi salam. The struggle begins as a prophet and a messenger. He struggles with Pharaoh and the people of Egypt. And then a very serious struggle that he has with his own people. When you look at the story of Musa, the deck was stacked against him. Everything was not in his favor. And we addressed some of these things. So, for example, he was from a despised minority. He was from a despised minority. What does Allah say about this? إِنَّ فِرْعَوْنَ عَلَى فِي الْأَرْضِ وَجَعَلَ أَهْلَهَا شِيَعًا يَسْتَضْعِفُ طَائِفَةً مِّنْهُمْ يُذَبِّحُ أَبْنَاءَهُمْ وَيَسْتَحْيِي نِسَاءَهُمْ إِنَّهُ كَانَ مِنَ الْمُفْسِدِينَ. What did Pharaoh do? He arrogantly exalted himself. He thought he was the greatest, right? He divided his people into subservient groups. So all these people who were not of the Egyptian upper class, children of Israel and all these others, the slaves and this and that, they were worth nothing, right? So he persecuted them and he slaughtered the boys and he took the women as slaves, right? He was truly one of the corruptors. So he came from a class that was minority and was looked down upon. That's the one, he has a strike against him right there. Second strike, we already said he's a wanted man, right? When Allah commissioned him and told him, اذهب إلى فرعون, what was one of the things he responded to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He said, وَلَهُمْ عَلَيَّ ذَنْبٌ فَأَخَافُ أَن يَقْتُلُونَ. I'm a wanted man. I'm a fugitive. I'm afraid they might kill me. Imagine you fled your homeland for 10 years. You've been tried in absentia, right? You're a wanted man. And now all of a sudden you got to go back because you have a mission. Just saying, I'm afraid they might kill me. So that's strike 2. He's not eloquent. He's not well-spoken and, very good with words and, a guy who can smooth himself into conversation. So he says to Allah, وَأَخِي هَارُونُ هُوَ أَفْصَحُ مِنِّي لِسَانًا فأرسله معي يريد أن يصدقني. My brother Harun, he's more eloquent. Musa was known to have a lisp. He was not very eloquent. He was difficult to understand. So he said, why don't you send Harun with me so he can speak a little bit more? It might be easier for them to understand the message. Maybe they would believe me. So that's strike 3. He's outnumbered. Musa alayhi salam was outnumbered. So even as he's going through the message, what does Allah say? فَمَا آمَنَ لِمُوسَى إِلَّا ذُرِّيَّةٌ مِّن قَوْمِهِ عَلَى خَوْفٍ مِّن فِرْعَوْنَ وَمَلَئِهِمْ أَن يَفْتِنَهُمْ. Very few people would respond. And it wasn't from the first generation. The first generation were like, no man, we're good. It took the second generation and only a few from the second generation. So that's strike number 4. Look at this. The deck is stacked against Musa alayhi salam. Number 5, he's dealing with a vicious media campaign against him. You say, what media? No newspapers, no Facebook, no CNN, no Fox. There's no media. No, it was vicious media, and it was media of the time. What did Fir'aun say about Musa and those who supported him? إِنَّ هَؤُلَاءِ لَشِرْذِمَةٌ قَلِيلُونَ. Those are just outcasts, so they're just a handful. So he's spreading this in society, in the community. These are just a bunch of outcasts. Don't listen to them. And to try and to convince people not to listen to Musa, he gathers the ultimate media, which were the magicians of the time. وَقَالَ فِرْعَوْنُ ائْتُونِي بِكُلِّ سَاحِرٍ عَلِيمٍ. Fir'aun said, get me the best magicians out there. Because the magicians were the ones who were in control. They were the ones who would sway people. And when the magicians came, they wanted money. What are you going to give us? Because that's how they were going to convince people. فَجُمِعَ السَّحَرَةُ لِمِيقَاتِ يَوْمٍ مَعْلُومٍ وَقِيلَ لِلنَّاسِ هَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُجْتَمِعُونَ لَعَلَّنَا نَتَّبِعُ السَّحَرَةَ إِنْ كَانُوا هُمُ الْغَالِبِينَ. People were gathered for a certain appointed day, and they were told, let's see what these magicians are able to do. Let's see how well the media can orchestrate and how they can twist the news and how they can manipulate things so that we can convince people of what we want them to believe. It's the same exact approach, but the tools were different. So that was the 5th thing that was against Musa alayhi salam. Number 6, and this is huge. He's facing a tyrant. He's not going to address his neighbor. He's not talking to his family. He's not talking to his friends. He's going, اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى. Allah sends him straight to the lion's den. Right? And what did Fir'aun say? When he was at the peak of his arrogance, قال أنا ربكم الأعلى. He said, I am your Lord, the Most High. And what can be the greatest form of tyranny than to force people not to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala freely, and to force them to worship someone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Great level of tyranny. So, as we said, Musa was walking into the lion's den. So what do we learn? And this is where we're going to really spend the time, because this is where it's important. What do we learn from Musa's experience here? From the very beginning, even before he was a messenger, even before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, اذهب إلى فرعون, the most important thing, and this is a recurring theme, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control from beginning to end. When Allah said to Musa, to Musa's mother, وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى أُمِّ مُوسَى, He inspired the mother of Musa, and أَرْضِعِيهِ, nurse him. فَإِذَا خِفْتِ عَلَيْهِ, if you're still afraid, because she knows those soldiers are coming at any moment to look for all those males and to kill them. فَأَلْقِيهِ فِي الْيَمِّ. Seems counterintuitive. It says, if you're afraid for your newborn's well-being, then throw him in the river. Tell that to any mother today. If you're afraid for your child's well-being, go outside and throw him in the river. And say, are you crazy? Throw my child in the river? It's impossible. But this is the heart of the believer that is connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah reassures her. He says, وَلَا تَخَافِ وَلَا تَحْزَنِ. Have no fear and do not grieve. And then He gives her promises, 2 promises. إِنَّا رَادُوهُ إِلَيْكَ. He will come back to you. We're going to bring him back to you. And something even greater. وَجَعِلُوهُ مِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. And He's going to be a messenger. So Allah's telling her there's a great plan for him. So Allah is telling her this is all within the realm of my plan. So if you trust in my plan, do as I tell you, even though it may seem counterintuitive. Safety would be to hold my child close to me, right? Safety would indicate taking the child and running away, right? Safety would suggest bundling the child up and hiding him, right? But Allah is telling her, no. His safety lies in throwing him in the river, where he will be carried by the slow waves right to his enemy, to his enemy's doorsteps. So Allah is always in control. And then when Allah commissioned Musa later and Harun, and they said, we're afraid, what are we going to do? And he said, I'm a wanted man, what am I going to do? They're going to kill me. قَالَ لَا تَخَافَا. Have no fear. إِنَّنِي مَعَكُمَا أَسْمَعُ وَأَرَى. I am with you both. I hear everything and I see everything. So what's Allah telling us? If Allah is always there, remember when we had that discussion about Ma'iyyatullah, the omnipresence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? If I have that true faith that Allah is always there, Allah is omnipresent, Allah is aware of everything, Allah is all hearing, He's all seeing, what do I have to worry about? What do I have to be afraid of? Absolutely nothing. The next lesson. And it stems from this, even tyrants operate within the realm of Allah's plan. So Fir'aun planned, his plan was kill all the boys, right? He said, a boy's going to kill me, kill all their boys. But he cannot operate outside of Allah's plan. They plan, and Allah plans, and Allah is the best of planners. So what does Allah tell us? فَالْتَقَطَهُ آلُ فِرْعَوْنَ لِيَكُونَ لَهُمْ عَدُوًّا وَحَزَنًا. So Pharaoh's people picked him up, meaning Musa, not knowing that he would eventually be an enemy and a source of grief. They thought, oh, we're picking up this nice little boy. But little did they realize that this little boy would be a source, would be a thorn in their side. Right? This was the one that Fir'aun had seen in his dream, but he had no idea. And then his wife said, قُرَّةُ عَيْنٍ لِي وَلَكَ لَا تَقْتُلُوهُ عَسَىٰ أَن يَنفَعَنَا أَوْ نَتَّخِذَهُ وَلَدًا وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. She said, he's a source of joy for me. Don't kill him. Maybe we'll find some use for him and adopt him. And they were unaware of what was to come. So even a tyrant, as much as a tyrant and an oppressor plans and, optimizes their plan and does everything in their might and power and all the resources, this young boy who had no power, no resources, could not take care of his own needs, could not feed himself, but he was under the care of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and ultimately the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was going to carry out. Another important lesson. Musa alayhi salam was human. Even though he's a prophet, alayhi salam, he's human. He had human emotions and human reactions to situations. And sometimes these emotions would overcome him. And it's normal for us as human beings to have these reactions. But they have to be within the confines of the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, when he was a wanted man, what did Allah describe him? فخرج منها خائفا يترقب. He fled, he was afraid. Normal human reaction to be afraid. Afraid for your life and safety. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded him to throw the staff, when he was showing him the signs, and then it turned into a big snake, what happened? فأوجس في نفسه خيفة موسى. This was when he was facing the magicians, and they threw their sticks, and they all started to move. He had a little apprehension. He knows that what they're doing is magic, but now he's going to throw his staff, which he knows is a miracle from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he still had an element of human response. Is my miracle really going to work? Are they going to believe it? But Allah comforted him. قُلْنَا لَا تَخَفْ إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْأَعْلَى. Have no fear. You're going to be superior here. You're going to win this because you're supported by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then later, after they've already passed, they crossed the river, and Musa is now facing the challenges with the Israelites and everything else. And when he went away for 40 nights, and Harun is staying with the Israelites, and they decide, to build a small calf, and they worship it, and all of that. And Musa comes back, and he's angry, and Allah describes it in very exquisite detail. وَلَمَّا رَجَعَ مُوسَى إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ غَضْبَانَ أَسِفًا. He comes back, and he's angry, and he's upset at what they're doing. What have you done after I left? And then he tosses the tablets that Allah had sent down upon him, وَأَخَذَ بِرَأْسِ أَخِيهِ يَجُرُّهُ. And he grabs his brother, Harun. He grabs him by his head and from the beard. He starts, shaking him. What's wrong with you? Why aren't you upholding, the message that you're supposed to be taking care of? So he had natural human emotions and reactions. But then Allah says he calmed down, he settled down, and everything came back. So Musa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us the human aspect of these prophets and messengers, sallallahu alayhi ajma'in, that they are no different than us, except Allah guarded them from committing major sins. Another lesson is that the truth is not determined by majority or numbers. This is very important. It's not by how many likes and shares and comments and all of that I determine where the truth is. More people are leaning left, so left must be right. More people are leaning right, the right must be correct. No. فَمَا آمَنَ لِمُوسَى إِلَّا ذُرِّيَّةٌ. Right? We know from the story of Nuh alayhi salam, 950 years inviting his people. فَمَا آمَنَ مَعَهُ إِلَّا قَلِيلٌ. Very few people. So this is very important that we don't get fooled by numbers. That numbers don't become our measure of success in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another lesson from the story of Musa alayhi salam is the need for perseverance. Because one of the common denominators for persecution is faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning that this faith, our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be, to a certain extent, a reason for persecution and oppression. So when Musa was facing the magicians, they were very proud. Allah describes it as they were laying their sticks, قَالُوا بِعِزَّةِ فِرْعَوْنَ إِنَّا لَنَحْنُ الْغَالِبُونَ. By the honor and majesty of Fir'aun, we're winning this. We're on top. They were so sure that Musa was just, he's an incompetent magician. We got this. They told Fir'aun, don't worry about it, we got this. But because they're magicians and they're so talented and they know magic, when Musa threw the staff, they knew immediately this was not magic. They knew that what he did was not magic. So they immediately submitted. So 1 minute, they are so proud of what they are doing and the magic that they are presenting. The next moment, قَالُوا آمَنَّا بِرَبِّ مُوسَى وَهَارُونَ. They submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what does Fir'aun do? Immediately, arrogant as he is, قَالَ آمَنْتُ لَهُ قَبْلَ أَنْ آذَنَ لَكُمْ. You believe in him before I give you permission? إِنَّهُمْ لَكَبِيرُكُمُ الَّذِي عَلَّمَكُمُ السِّحْرَ. He's your big magician. He's the big magician who taught you all the magic that you know. So what's he going to do? He threatens them. He threatens to cut off their hands and feet and to crucify them. But what's their response? What's their response? Oh, okay, well, give us a chance, we'll think about it. You don't really have to do that. These are people who just accepted the faith. The switch just got turned on. Just 5 minutes before, they were standing next to Fir'aun saying, how much are you going to pay us? For showing people that this guy's a fool. This is what they were asking Fir'aun. Yeah, of course. You're going to be my close advisors. And now just a few minutes later, they're saying, Prophet Musa. So how can you do a 180-degree flip, and now you're being threatened that you're going to be crucified and your arms and legs are going to be cut off? How's your response going to be? Put yourself in their shoes. How's your response going to be? Well, their response, قالوا لن نؤثرك على ما جاءنا من البينات والذي فطرنا فاقض ما أنت قاض إنما تقضي هذه الحياة الدنيا. They said, you know what? By Allah who created us, we will never prefer you over the clear proofs that come to us. They said this is clear evidence of what the truth is. It's clear. You don't want to see it, that's fine. It's up to you. But it's clear to us what the truth is. So do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. You only have power and authority in this life. You have no power and authority in the hereafter. We have believed in our Lord so that He may forgive our sins and the magic that you forced us to do in the past. So, patience and perseverance in the face of persecution. They were persecuted just because they accepted the faith. They did nothing else. Another lesson. It is imperative and important to eliminate existential threats. What does that mean? Our communities will always face threats from within and from outside. And we must stand up to these threats, and the ones that threaten our existence, our core fundamental basic existence, they must be eliminated. And what am I talking about here? So after Musa alayhi salam and Bani Israel and the believers who believed from Qawm Fir'aun joined him, and they crossed the river, and Fir'aun was drowned and his people drowned and all that. They went to the other side. Now they're beginning a new chapter. The challenges are different. So remember I alluded to when Musa went and he had the 40 days where he was away and Harun was with Bani Israel, and there was this guy, his name was Samiri, and he came up with this calf and told them, this is your Lord, and he designed it in a way so when the wind would blow it would howl, and said, oh, it makes noise, it must be God, and all of this other crazy stuff. So they started to worship it. And so when Musa came back, he told them, we talked about his immediate response and how he was angered and all that, and after he calmed down, he started, okay, what's going on here? And he said, this guy, Samiri, he's the one who did it. What happened? What happened? So he explained to Musa, I did this, and that, and I felt it was a good idea, and I erected this idol, and people went along with it. This was an existential threat to the faith of the community, to the aqidah, which is the basic foundation. So there was no room here to be wishy-washy, to tell them, well, you know what, let's put this idol on the side, and let's talk about it tomorrow, or you know what, we'll sleep on it and think about it in the morning, or let's have a community discussion and see what the community thinks about it. Absolutely not. There was no room for discussion because this was a matter of an existential threat, a threat to the existence of the community. So what did Musa alayhi salam do? قَالَ فَذْهَبْ. He exiled him. He was exiled completely, not allowed to stay with the community. He's done. فَإِنَّ لَكَ فِي الْحَيَاةِ أَن تَقُولَ لَا مِسَاسٍ. You have the right. No one will touch you. You're not allowed to deal with our community, and our community is not allowed to deal with you. No buying, no selling, no marriage, nothing. You're completely exiled from our community. وَإِنَّ لَكَ مَوْعِدًا لَن تُخْلَفَ. You have a due date, and you will face the consequences for your action. وانظر إلى إلهك الذي ظلت عليه عاكفا. Look at this God that you claimed and that you worshipped and that you invited people to worship. He's not going to be put in a museum. He's not an artifact. He's not a piece of art. No. What did he say? لَنُحَرِّقَنَّهُ ثُمَّ لَنَنْسِفَنَّهُ فِي الْيَمِّ نَسْفًا. We are going to burn it, turn it into pieces, and obliterate it, spread it in the river. That's it, done. Because this was an existential threat. This was a major threat to something critical, which was the aqidah, the faith of the community. And this is not an issue that we can be wishy-washy. It's not a matter. This is not a matter where there can be discussion. This is not an area of differences of opinion. Aqidah, no difference of opinion. So we cut it from the foundation. Another lesson from the story of Musa alayhi salam is that tyranny and oppression will eventually come to an end. Allah told us that. It will come to an end. All tyrants and all of these kings and those who oppress their people, if you just do a quick reading of history, they're a thing of the past. But the story of Musa tells us that there are prerequisites that we have to do. There are things that we have to do on our part in order for that tyranny to end. So Allah begins, in the beginning of the story of Musa and Fir'aun. He says, وَنُرِيدُ أَن نَمُنَّ عَلَى الَّذِينَ اسْتُضْعِفُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَنَجْعَلَهُمْ أَئِمَّةً وَنَجْعَلَهُمُ الْوَارِثِينَ. So Allah is telling us, we want to bestow our favor upon the oppressed and the meek, and we want to grant them leadership and make them successors. So that's, Allah wants to uplift this misery. But it's not a free carte blanche. You don't just get it because of who you are. You don't get it because Allah looks at you and says, oh, you know what, you're of this race, or you're of this nationality, or this ethnicity. No. You have to work and strive for it. So how did Musa entice his people to work and strive for this oppression to end? وَقَالَ مُوسَى يَا قَوْمِ إِن كُنْتُمْ آمَنْتُمْ بِاللَّهِ. That's number one. So there has to be that faith, right? فَعَلَيْهِ تَوَكَّلُوا إِن كُنْتُمْ مُسْلِمِينَ. So there has to be faith, there has to be trust in Allah, and then there has to be full submission. Allah says right, I go right. He says left, I go left. He says pause, I pause. He says this is permissible, then I do it. He says this is obligatory, then I oblige. He says this is prohibited, then I stay away. So full submission to Allah with faith, and putting my trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the first step. So what did they respond? قَالُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ تَوَكَّلْنَا. They said, we put our trust fully in Allah. رَبَّنَا لَا تَجْعَلْنَا فِتْنَةً لِلْقَوْمِ الظَّالِمِينَ. Oh Allah, do not subject us to the persecution of the oppressive people. So there has to be action. There has to be faith. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Faith and righteous deeds. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upped the ante. Next notch. وأوحينا إلى موسى وأخيه أن تبوأ لقومكما بمصر بيوتا واجعلوا بيوتكم قبلة وأقيموا الصلاة وبشر المؤمنين. So Allah revealed to Musa and his brother Harun, choose certain homes in your community that will be homes where you will gather to pray. So they didn't have mosques, masajid, but certain homes where the community will gather and establish prayers. So the ritualistic acts that will gather the community together. So you need ritualistic acts and you need community. If you want to end oppression, you start with the iman, right? The trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the full submission in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ritualistic, salah. No prayer, you're not going to get that. These are all components, right? And you need the community, right? And make your homes an area, a direction for people to gather. Why? Because they're going to get their guidance from whom? From the prophets, Musa and Harun, may Allah, peace be upon them. وَقَالَ Musa. So once they've kind of done what they can, what does Allah say? The next step that Musa did. Now he is beseeching Allah, the dua. وقال موسى ربنا إنك آتيت فرعون وملأه زينة وأموالا في الحياة الدنيا ربنا ليضلوا عن سبيلك ربنا اطمس على أموالهم واشدد على قلوبهم فلا يؤمنوا حتى يروا العذاب الأليم. So now after submitting, after trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after having the faith, and after praying and doing all the ritualistic acts of worship, and after establishing that community that is in unison and submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and striving to establish the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and striving to bring down the oppressor, we couple that with beseeching Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know that Fir'aun and his people, they are oppressive, they have done this, they have used the resources that you have given them to oppress everyone. Oh Allah, what does he say? Let these luxuries and riches in this world which they have abused, which they've used to lead people astray, destroy their riches, harden their hearts so that they don't believe until they see the painful punishment. So they've done their part, right? They pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so now they've come full circle. So what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? You've done your part. You've done everything you can. You've beseeched me. I'm responding. I'm granting you what you want. Allah responded, your prayer is answered, so be steadfast. Continue. Don't sit back and say, okay, I've done my part, now I go home. No, continue. Stay on this path. So, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows how, he brought down the demise of Fir'aun. So, yes, tyranny and oppression will come to an end, but there are prerequisites on our part. So when we look around the world and we say, oh, there's tyranny and oppression around the world here and there, what have we done? What have we done on our end in that full circle? That's the question we need to ask. Another lesson, we must keep up our guard, especially when times are easy. So when Musa and Bani Israel were in Egypt, it was very easy for them to keep their guard up. They're being beat up right and left and kicked right and left, and Fir'aun is tormenting them. Once they crossed the river, they started to think outside the box. They started to think outside the box. So وَجَاوَزْنَا بِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ الْبَحْرَ فَأَتَوْا عَلَى قَوْمٍ يَعْكُفُونَ عَلَى أَصْنَامِ اللَّهِ. After they crossed the river, the children of Israel, they started to think, they saw some people worshiping some idols. They said, hey, Musa, why don't you find us some idols? They were worshiping Allah before. But now things are starting to get easy. They're starting to relax. Now they want to think outside the box. This is not just the children of Israel. This is true. This is human nature. When things get easy, I start to get relaxed and lax in my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah's not putting these stories for us to just, read and keep them. No. These are for us to learn from. That I have to keep my guard up even higher, especially when times are easy. Because shaitan comes to me, tries to pull me away. What did Musa say? You're ignorant people. What these people are doing, worshiping these idols, you're worshiping Allah, the one and only. This is what we've been spending all these years trying to convince Fir'aun to do. And now that we're saved for him, now we want to start worshiping these idols. What's wrong with you people? So keeping our guard up, especially during times when things are easy. Because we don't want to stray away from the straight path. Another lesson. The message must be very clear and unambiguous in our mind and also when we deliver it. So when Fir'aun asked Musa, فَمَا رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ? Who is Allah? He tell him, let's talk about that later. Because this was a big thing. Fir'aun said, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى, right? That was the crux. That was the key thing. He said, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. So he says, فَمَا رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ? Who are you worshiping? They say, well, you know what? If I tell him I worship one God, he's going to get really mad. So let's talk about the weather. And they just kind of come to that later after we have a nice dinner. No. What did it? قَالَ رَبُّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا إِن كُنتُم مُوقِنِينَ. The Lord of the heavens and the earth, and what is in between them. And he's telling you, you're nothing, man. You're nothing. You have no power, and Allah is the Lord of the heavens and the earth and everything in between. So being very clear in our message without watering it down. Without watering it down to please anyone or to avoid anyone's wrath. Because we are here to please one and only one, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when Musa saw the magicians trying to bring out the best of their magic, he didn't leave them alone and say, yeah, I'm going to beat them now, I'm going to throw this down, forget them. He's still trying his best to convince them. قال لهم موسى وإنكم لا تفتروا على الله كذبا فيسحتكم بعذاب. He's telling them, be careful, I'm warning you. Don't fabricate a lie against Allah or He's going to wipe you out. So He's giving them a way out, a last minute way out to stop and to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's being very clear. He's telling them, if you go down this path, it's a severe torment and torture from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And finally, the way we deliver the message. There's an approach to delivering the message. So even though this is Fir'aun, and even though this is the most arrogant man, and even though this guy tormented his people, in spite of all of these things, what did Allah say to Musa and Harun? فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا لَعَلَّهُ يَتَذَكَّرُ أَوْ يَخْشَىٰ. Say to him, speak to him gently. Speak to him gently. Perhaps he may be mindful of me, subhanahu wa ta'ala, or fearful of my punishment. So it doesn't matter. Even if you're going to the most powerful person, someone who is aggressive, someone who is this or that, there is still a kind and gentle approach to convey the message of Islam. There are, of course, many more lessons, but because of time, I think if we can take in these lessons, I think that would be wonderful, inshallah. So, what are some things? Practical things. This is what we like to focus on. What are some practical things that we can take from the story of Musa? Again, اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى. Go to Fir'aun, he has indeed transgressed greatly. That's the verse we're focusing on in the context of Muharram and Ashura and commemorating the event that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved Musa and the children of Israel from the oppression of Fir'aun. Number one, there's a lot to learn from the story of Musa. I think that's self-evident. Much more. We scratched the surface. Remember, we said Musa is mentioned 136 times in the Qur'an. The story is detailed 10 times. So I encourage everyone to try and learn the story of this great prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number two, trusting that Allah is always in control. Musa put his trust in Allah. In spite of all these natural human reactions and fear and anticipation and worry and all that, and his mother being worried and all that, what gave them success was that they put their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We must align ourselves as Muslims, as believers, with justice, irrespective of the majority. So, we flow with justice, not with the majority. We don't go with the flow, right? We don't go with the flow. I see that all the youth, mashallah, has left. They went with the flow. So, this would have been an important point for them to hear. But I think we said it earlier. We don't go with the flow. But, as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in a hadith, let not one of you be a mere follower. He says, if people do good, then I do good. If they do bad, then I do bad. Basically, someone who has no principles. But rather be someone who is principled. Have principled stances. If people do good, then do good and support them. But if they do bad, avoid what they are doing and stand with justice. And this is, stand up for justice. And in order to do that, we have to establish that justice within ourselves, at the individual level, at the family level, with our spouses, with our children, with our neighbors, within the community, before we can expect there to be justice at the global level. It's not going to happen. We work at all those levels, but we really have to fix home before we can expect the global level to change. And finally, we need to be firm, persistent, consistent, and clear in our message. In our message and efforts for justice and in supporting the oppressed. So if there's one thing that I will say that summarizes all of this, I think every one of us should strive to be a model Musa in whatever capacity you can be. I'll say that again. Everyone should strive to be a model Musa, meaning standing up against tyranny and oppression in whatever capacity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit us from what we have heard. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide our hearts to that which is best. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our sins. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us all amongst those who stand for justice and who support the oppressed. اللهم امين. اقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فستذكرون ما اقول لكم وافوض امري الى الله ان الله بصير بالعباد. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمه الله وبركاته.